The Pixel 2 XL. The phone I like a lot, which I would consider maybe the OG PILF. Phone I like to fuck. And no, I will not be explaining that. So the reason why I call the Pixel 2 XL a PILF is more or less its specs. Compared to its brother at the time, the LG V30, the Mate 20 and P20 from Huawei, and also Samsung's S8 and Note 8 series, and even the iPhones at the time brand new refresh of design, the iPhone 10, was kind of mute in comparison to the Pixel 2 XL, in my opinion. Because at the time, the Pixel 2 XL at specs was a Snapdragon 835, 4 gigs of RAM, 64 and 128 gigs of storage with a panda color, which I do not have, but I do have the black one, and with a great camera, but also great for media consumption with its 18:9 aspect ratio with a 1440p panel with front-facing speakers, where you can also have it with Google Assistant and USB-C charging, where comparing at its time to its competitors more or less, where they all either had some of that or missing one or the two features here. The only feature that was missing on the Pixel 2 XL, which I still wish it had, was the headphone jack, but the LG V30 at the time had a quad deck, which was more king, and rip LG more or less. Where the other phones like the S8 and Note 8 from Samsung and Huawei P20 and Mate 20, where there were just like some weird augmentations that didn't make sense, like with the fingerprint scanner being right next to the camera on the S8 and Note 8, and with Huawei more or less kind of getting banned from the United States just before release of the Mate 20, which made the Pixel 2 XL from what would have been considered probably a subpar phone to something great for its year. But how has it held up? From my personal experience, it's held up pretty well, honestly. I had very little lag except with the camera, but we're going to go into that in a moment though. But this is mainly due to Google using stock Android, plain Android, very little integration. Also, because of this, there was very little customization and very little software feature like video recording. That only came to the Pixel 2 on Android 11, like natively, and like the Pixel and in the Android 10 as developer options using ADB. But even though it had 4 gigs of RAM, it still ran fine though. It's just that there's very little software features to keep it different. The only thing it had over its competitors was its Google Assistant's integration with song detection and more or less having Google Assistant's squeeze function and more fully built and baked into the phone almost. The downsides are really not really downsides, but mainly the issues, hardware issues came with the Pixel 2 XL was more or less the OLED burning in a lot more easier than it should have been on the larger model, where that reduced the nits from by 50 nits or so. The camera more or less having a hardware failure with the OIS, where if the OIS has failed, it won't even start up the camera app anymore. Also, a big one at release was the more or less the Wi-Fi being disconnected when using Bluetooth or all the time at random moments, even though the Wi-Fi was still available. Oh yeah, also when Google released the Pixel 2 XL, they released it with the Pixel Buds, which are kind of but I mean they kind of look like it was a nice sports, but I never used them though. And also the Google Home Mini, the only thing that probably will outlive us all, to be frank. It's a good smart speaker. I keep it on my night desk, but I keep it on mute most of the time. I do not need to have it hear my hentai addiction at all, but that's besides the point. But when I need to use it, I do use it. Very great, as right here. Okay, Google, what is tomorrow's date?
It is Thursday, July 1st, 2021.
Even though Fire being like nearly 3 years old, it still works pretty good. I'll see. I have no reason to really upgrade. I just use it to ask questions. That's it. Also, they used this weird ass camera. I don't know what the fuck it was, but it was like supposed to take random shots. It wasn't even as good as the Pixel camera, which I was kind of shocked, but that's besides the point, I guess. I mean, it's not even continued use anymore. There's no like successor to it, so whatever. But even with all its downsides, with its hardware issues, I still love the phone, mainly because of its multimedia purposes. We have this bigger aspect ratio where Sony still didn't release a 21:9 4K phone yet, but this 18:9 was probably the closest thing we got to a cinematic aspect ratio with front-facing speakers, where we can truly get immersed into what we're watching. It sucked that I didn't have a headphone jack, but I think it's besides the point. It still sucks now. Still a big fan of the headphone jack. Will eventually get a phone with the headphone jack if I can, but that's besides the point right now. Its 1440p display, even though it had some issues, was still a great display. It had still great software support, and the phone didn't really lag at all or anything like this. So I had no issues, using daily driving this as a phone, just for, basic multimedia purposes. Now, there could be issues where it's like, gaming and stuff, but I mean, to be frank, I don't really want to game on a phone that has an 835 with anything intensive like, COD Mobile or Genshin Impact. And I personally, I'm a PC guy, and if I really wanted to play on my phone, I would grab a Xbox controller and play, Xbox Game Pass or something on that. Also, the battery life held up quite well, even though I kind of just abused it, where I was able to get like, from 4 to 6 hours or so, depending on the day and how much I used it. Even before pre-pandemic, I was able to get a good enough battery life on that very last me the whole day. Didn't recharge it until I had to go to sleep. Honestly, great, but these days now it's a bit more like 3 hours or so. But that's just because it's I just been using a lot more, and also it's also time for an upgrade. It's a 4-year-old phone at this point now. The Pixel 6 being released in like October or so. So it's nothing that surprising, but besides the point though. But would I recommend this phone to anyone else now? And buying it like, used or brand new? Yeah, I would say so, as more as like not as a main, but as like a secondary or burner phone, because it still has eSIM support, which is great. It also has an unlocked bootloader, which for it being a Google phone and being stock, you have ROMs like the Lineage OS and like Pixel Experience, where you can extend this phone's life support more or less. Also having Google Photos, even though this is not like the original Pixel that is unlimited original quality, you have higher quality for lifetime on this phone until it breaks more or less. And for like paying for $50 or $60, that's not a bad deal to use, as a secondary phone. The cameras still hold up pretty well. The videography on that not as so much, but that's besides the point. It wasn't that great even to begin with when it was released. But to just use as a burner phone or just to mess around, I think it's a great deal. And honestly, I would recommend it because it's like where it seemed like Google actually kind of how to describe gave a shit, trying to make the Pixel like the phone to buy in comparison to the phones afterwards. Like, what the fuck was the 3XL and what the hell was 4? The 5 made sense because it was sort of like a mid-range phone that was premium. And honestly, that's probably gonna be my next Pixel phone if I can even find the goddamn Sony Xperia Mark 3, either the 5 or 1. I will take any one of those at this point, or even if I can even afford it. But that's, again, besides the point. As a phone, just to tinker around and mess with it, it's a great experience. But should you buy this phone, like, user new? Honestly, not anymore, because I used to recommend, getting flagship phones you use like a year old or something. But if you need something like, decent just for like surfing the web and like social media, just buy a mid-range phone. Because those will have just as well, good, specs enough for that nearly all-day battery life because it's using a less powerful socket. And honestly, probably be a better user experience because it would have features like the headphone jack still, something that even the only company I know left that still has it is Sony on the high end. It used to be LG, but they're gone now. So, I mean, yeah, you don't have many hardware features, so just go with maybe a lower end one. And the Pixel low end, like Pixel A series, is amazing for that because it has hardware features that even the premium series doesn't have, like a goddamn headphone jack. Like, what the hell, Google? But I did digress. So, the Pixel 2 XL. A phone that I love, but it's really been outdated. There are better phones now, like the Sony Xperia 1 Mark III, where it really does take its place as this ultimate multimedia device. If you can even afford or buy one at this point, but that's a later discussion for a later date. Anyway, thank you for listening to this rant. Goodbye.